Okay, welcome back to all of the millions of listeners that will no doubt tune into this. It's another sporting blog podcast. We've had a little break because I've been busy doing other things, and we do try only to get really interesting guests. We're not really a podcast that just fills in the blanks and has to do one every week. And this year we've had the founder of Reebok, we've had the chairman of the Esports Association, we've had 20-year world champion of real tennis Rob Fay, we've had sports marketing guru Tim Crow, and now I'm pleased to say we have some people who are not male and also a bit younger, which is nice for us. So I've got with me Amy, Eve, and Caitlin. Caitlin's frozen, so we'll see if she stays with us or not. Wi-Fi issues. In fact, she's gone, but let's kick off anyway. And when she comes back, she comes back. Some of you, dear listeners, may have seen, and I hope you have seen, the Her Game 2 initiative that was launched about a week ago. We're 27th of May now. And it piqued my interest as someone that has a day job in a sport that, luckily for us, is ahead of the curve when it comes to gender equality, including, same prize money for men and women. They can compete in races and all of that stuff. But one thing that's long bugged me, and as a sort of tragic Twitter user myself, the interaction between some male football fans, in inverted commas, and women that are interested in the game. So the Her Game 2 campaign uncovered and highlighted some uncomfortable truths, I think, for a lot of us. And I got three of the starring cast. No pun intended there, Amy. And I think let's just start off by doing an introduction. So why don't we start with Amy? She's top left as I'm looking at it.
Sure. So my name's Amy, and I'm one of the 12 founders of Her Game 2, based in London, and normally work in theatre. So kind of football is sort of my hobby on the side. I've always loved football growing up and played it and watched it all my life. And I'm a Swansea fan.
Okay, Eve, why don't you give us your spiel?
Okay, so my name's Eve. I'm a Bristol City fan based in Solihull, and football has basically shaped my life since leaving school. So I went on to uni, did a sports degree, and ever since then I'm a football coach, and my career is now based in the footballing industry.
Caitlin, why don't you finish us off?
So I'm a Newport County fan, Newport born and bred, based in Cheltenham, currently in my final year of university, studying sports journalism. And yeah, I live and breathe sport. If I'm not watching it as a hobby, I'm working on it, and I just can't escape it, but I love it.
Okay, so the first thing to say, of course, is that clearly you're all passionate about, let's just say, football, but sport in general. It's in your DNA, and in one way, shape or form, you're involved in this every day. So there's no kind of sport virtue signaling here. There's no we're kind of sporty girls type thing. It's all legit. So let's just get that out of the way for a start. You've probably done a number of these things I've seen on TV, and probably other podcast interviews where you've explained where Her Game 2 came from and the background to it. But let's just cut straight to the chase and let's look at the uncomfortable bit first. So whichever one of you wants to go first, why don't you just explain or highlight something that may have happened to you specifically online that helped spark the motivation to do this? And if you want to paint an uncomfortable picture, that's fine. Hopefully there's mainly adults listening.
Who wants to go first?
Go for it, Caitlin.
Yeah, I think I'll get myself out of the way first, because I think initially when I was approached to be part of the campaign, I was thinking I don't really get too much sexist abuse online, and I thought to myself, oh, I'm quite lucky. And then I said that out loud, and I thought that sounds absolutely insane to say that I'm lucky to not get sexist abuse, which absolutely blew my mind. And I thought this campaign, the angry people shouldn't just be the ones receiving the abuse online. It should be everyone. It should be dads, uncles, brothers, friends, you know, people who don't like football. It should be everyone that's angry and passionate about, you know, women having a voice in sport. But I think my experience kind of comes from more of like a professional point of view, in terms of I've been in press boxes where, you know, if we get uncomfortable, men look you up and down, or I've walked into offices and men have asked, you know, who in the office are you, you know, seeing, or like who you're in a relationship with, or which player do you fancy. You know, I've had men push in front of me in queues waiting for press passes for FA Cup games when I was there reporting for the FA. So yeah, they're kind of my experiences. I suppose they come from yeah, more of like the professional side instead of the social media side of things. But yeah, I think we need to be as passionate about both sides, because I think social media, people see it as a past to just be horrible.
Yeah, that's right. Eve, why don't you tell us something that, you know, may have happened to you that you know, can sort of help us zone in on how this stuff really came about.
Okay, so I've got like all the traditional, you can't have an opinion, you're a girl, you don't know anything about the sport, why don't you support the women's game? And then the classics, why don't you make me a sandwich? I've been sent just the sandwich emoji. I thought that was quite clever.
That's also like the weakest. If someone's going to give
So
you
weak.
abuse, it's
It's so
weakest one.
poor, honestly.
I don't bother to type it, just sandwich emoji, there you go. But I experienced it quite a lot on nights out. So because I'm based in the West Midlands, I'll get chatting to people on a night out, and we'll be having a talk about football. The majority of the time they're going to be Villa or Blues fans. And I remember one time I was talking to these, I think they were about to go into the playoff final, about to get promoted, and we were chatting about our experiences out of football. That was absolutely fine. And then just a stone's throw away, there was some men, like not part of their group, who found out I was a Bristol City fan, and they just started like making rude gestures. Cockney rhyming slang for Bristol City is titties, so they're going, ooh, get your Bristol titties out to me, making all these gestures and just shouting over me, not listening to the fact that I've been going for the past 20 years, and just really got to me. To be fair, they knew what they were doing, and it's just attitudes like that. It's just really cheap banter. It's not even banter there, it's wrong. And I think it's being perceived as, oh, you should take a joke, oh, we don't mean it, get back in the kitchen. But it's just been going on for far too long, and I think the people saying it don't realise just how frustrating it is. Like, why should we have to prove that we are allowed to have a say, to go, to prove ourselves, and so I think people have got away with it for far too long, and we've had enough.
Yeah, that's, well, we'll come on to those details. But Amy, I mean, give us an example from your side.
Sure. I think listening to the girls, I think it is so interesting for us as a group of 12. I think each of us have slightly different experiences of this, whether it is what Caitlin said, like this is in her sort of workplace, you know, this is happening. And for me personally, it's been a much more online based problem. I personally, not that I can really remember any time I've experienced it in real life, going to a game. I've often been with my family, you know, whether that affects anything or not, I don't know. But I've been lucky, if you want to say, like Caitlin did, to not experience it to my face. But yeah, I've always been quite vocal with my support for the Swans, like on Twitter, but obviously March last year I got furloughed and I was able to really invest myself into all the football. Like I'll always sit through a football game, but I sort of really committed to like really getting to know the championship, like watching games I wouldn't normally watch, like getting really involved and sort of sharing my opinion on both Twitter and TikTok. And it's since doing that I have experienced sexist comments online, and similarly to what Eve has said about, you know, oh, your opinion's invalid, what would you know, you're a woman. You know, I'll put, you know, players maybe I think are underrated or overrated as like a, you know, copying trends on TikTok and Twitter, and the backlash that I get for something like that. And it's the fact that the comments, some people will disagree, and that's fine. We all like to acknowledge that we have an opinion, and sometimes people will disagree. But if you're going to disagree and then tell me it's because of my gender, or that my opinion's wrong because of my gender, then that's when the problem starts. And I think for me, over the past sort of 6 months, it seemed to just get worse and worse and worse. And I eventually just started sharing things on Twitter. This is what I'm experiencing, you know, and eventually Kaz, who founded Her Game 2, sort of picked me up and got me on board. So that's my experience.
So, all slightly different, especially Caitlin in the professional environment, working in professional sport. That doesn't surprise me in many ways, which is a sad truth. How much of this is down to it being football and football fans, as opposed to it being, for example, would this happen if you were cricket fans? Would this happen if you were rugby fans?
I'm quite involved with like rugby. I've always watched rugby. Again, it's a massive family thing for us, and I've never online seen any sexist abuse towards women in rugby. I don't know if the girls have any other experiences, but I do think football is particularly bad. But that's just what I've seen, so I'm not sure whether anyone else has any other information about that.
Yeah,
Oh, go on, Eve.
I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
I agree. I don't see any, to be honest. To be fair, I'm not as invested in rugby and cricket, like only if there's a big tournament going on. But I think a lot of the abuse comes from profiles that haven't got proper profile picture, can't trace them, and I don't think they would, people like accounts like that exist in rugby and cricket. And then transferring that to experiences I've had in real life, I can't see being in a pub and then getting into a debate about having to justify why you're there. So I really do think it's a bigger issue in football. Yeah.
So do we put this down to the mentality of the football fan in general? Because, you know, again, without sugarcoating it, you don't often see fans fighting outside rugby stadium. You don't see opposition fans, and this, you know, rugby is a good example because the fans all get pissed, and cricket, people are drinking all day. They go in pubs before and after, and you don't see too many tear-ups apart from probably at the end of the night when everyone's, you know, falling about. So, you know, is this a football problem, or is it a wider societal problem with a demographic of that society? I mean, what you mentioned, Eve, about the faceless profile accounts, which, you know, in my gut feeling is for the most part, and by the use of language, are very young people, kids being morons, rather than what you'd say, you know, the sort of true misogynistic 50-year-old, what do you know about football sort of thing. And this come back to the question to me is like, how much is this a societal problem that somehow football fuels the fire of, as opposed to it being a kind of systemic problem within football? What do you think, Caitlin?
It's a good question, because I definitely know of scenarios of one of my good friends from uni, actually, she's on the same course as me, a year younger than me, and I know she wouldn't mind telling this story because she's been very vocal on social media and stuff anyway, herself. But she's like, rugby is her thing. She absolutely loves rugby. And she's been sat in a pub where, you know, the classic 50-year-old white male misogynistic has shouted over to her that she knows nothing about football. You know, obviously being the woman in the room. But then it does go from that to right down the other end, where you know, some of these boys are probably 10 years old with Twitter and these, you know, these footballers as their pictures, and they're so influenced by everyone else and what they're seeing that they're not, you know, they're not forming their own opinions. And I think it goes down to our generation is so influenced by everything we see on social media, even down to the way we look, how we act, what we buy, absolutely everything. And I think, yeah, the influence of social media is scary to me, and I think it can be a very, very dangerous thing.
I tell you for why. So I've got a season ticket, unfortunately, at Spurs. It's a weight that I have to bear. And the pub I go to before the game is the diviest dive pub you can get. Still got like an old square TV, and this is full of season ticket holders only. Reasonably hardcore, no aggravation, but dyed in the wool Spurs fans who've been going for years, men and women. And I've never heard in the pub anyone speak to a female fan with anything other than just the same banter we have. And this is your classic sort of misogynistic type of environment, you'd think. But actually, that sort of place, there's a mutual level of respect for people that go and have been going for years and years and all the rest of it. And I think that, of course, online, that sort of environment doesn't exist because, unless you're really close to someone and you know them in person and you interact with them online as well, all these other people are either faceless or they're complete strangers to you. And of course, your feelings and their feelings, there's no regard for either one. So I find it interesting, especially with you, Caitlin, sort of with your involvement with Newport County, which, is a different sort of environment to going to, Spurs' new spaceship stadium, which is not all it's cracked up to be, by the way. And it's sort of interesting taking the experiences of what you really see at the game or what, as opposed to then what lives online. And that unfortunately becomes our interpretation of what happens at the game. Now, I don't know, Amy or Eve, have you had any bad experiences at an actual match, like in the stands or in the pub, compared to maybe how it is when you're going to like a big match? Like if you go and watch the Champions League final, it's going to be all guys all supporting different teams, and maybe they're like, what are you doing here? Nonsense. Do you have the same bit when you go to watch Bristol City, Eve? Have you had, in the stands or in and around, have you had any grief?
I personally haven't. I mean, when I was 6 or 7, I remember I was eating a pie at the football and I got all gravy around my face, and the block were singing "Who ate all the pies?" to this.
Oh, Eve.
But I love that. I'm like, yeah, like I was the fatty eating the pie.
and Amy, what's your experience been?
But I have like seen it, especially being an away fan. I think the home fan women are really easy targets. You can find a chance that gets sung, but would that person who started the chant go up to a woman in the street and say it to her? I don't think they would. So I have seen it happen, but very, very rarely. And I want to make it clear that I really think it is the minority of football. I think football fans get such a bad rep, and there are some proper bad ones out there, but the majority aren't sexist, aren't racist, and just want to go and enjoy the game. So I'm not sure where these people are coming from, and as you say, it's probably just from what they're seeing on social media. I mean, I love when all these pictures come up and it's like 100 years ago, and it's all the working class men going to watch Liverpool, and they're all singing like all together. I just, that sends shivers down my spine, and I love that. But I also love how we've come so far from that, and I think the majority of people are with, and the people who are saying all these sexist things are, oh, it should still be the middle class men going. So I'm not tarring. I don't even think it's football fans, the majority of them, who are sending all this abuse. It's people like, cheap likes and retweets people online. I think I've proper diverted there, but I personally, I haven't received anything towards me about my gender at football games, but I have seen it happen very rarely.
And Amy?
No, nothing particularly directed at me. I would say that particularly as sort of a younger teenager, I have definitely felt intimidated, and that's not anyone's fault. That was me being a teenager, you know, feeling like I'm the only girl here, like, oh, I'm the only teenage girl around, you know, whatever. But I think that's something else that is something we can definitely look at with Her Game too, though, in making it a place where girls do feel more comfortable. You know, it can be a scary place. We all know, we've been surrounded by boys. Some teenage girls don't have the confidence to do that. They might want to go and see the football. So it would be good to sort of help younger girls sort of get to those matches and not feel so intimidated. But similarly to Eve, no, nothing, no sexist abuse thrown at me in the ground. But, you know, unfortunately, some women have.
Sure. And unfortunately, you know, those incidents aren't just confined to sporting arenas, as we know. So, you know, with a lot of this stuff being said, let's dial back round to Her Game 2 and what can be done about some of these things, whether it's, I mean, we obviously, the topic of unbranded social media accounts and all of that is a bigger story. I still maintain that if you charge people for something, it would get rid of it instantly. If you charge people £10 a month to be able to reply to tweets, for example, I think within about half an hour you would kick a lot of these people out, because they're not going to spend 120 quid a year for the benefit of just calling someone a dick. So there's that. Anyway, let's not get into that. Her Game 2 specifically, you've raised an awful lot of awareness this week. You've had some good media coverage. It's travelled across platforms, and I know you guys aren't finished yet. I wouldn't say what's the goal, but what practically comes next in order to start moving it away from the awareness phase? I know this only early days, but from awareness through to action and execution. What happens next in your minds? I know there's 12 of you, so you may all have slightly different things, but what happens next in your minds to kick this on? I've seen some brand work and other bits and pieces, obviously formalizing it, making it more official. What's next in making a real difference and seeing a change?
Anyone?
Well,
Yeah.
as 12 of us, so I think we've all got so many ideas.
We're like bursting at the seams, aren't
the
we?
group
We're like,
chat
"Ah!"
is crazy.
Like every day, it's like someone's like, "Oh, I've got an idea." But I think so. Even this is still raising awareness. But it was really important to me. I think the majority of the girls, we wanted to get the data to prove that it is actually an issue and it's not just the 12 of us. Therefore, we've sent this questionnaire out to girls. So we're not posting it publicly because we don't want it to get hijacked by people who aren't girls. So that's going to be really interesting to see that data coming through. And then that will help us shape where we want this campaign to go. And as Amy alluded to, like, we're really keen to make football a nice place to be, and for social media to be a happy, safe place to be to raise your opinions. Therefore, we've got lots of different ideas on how we want communities, and so an opportunity for girls to have this safe space to come and to help encourage them. Young girls, older girls, it doesn't matter, ladies, everyone's welcome, and we just want to create this nice community.
Eve, let me jump in because I've got some of the survey results in front of me if you want to see them. So we're still going with this. We've got just under 300 responses at the moment, and the ones that jump out to me are: have you ever seen any sexist abuse online targeted towards a woman in football? And 92% have said yes, which I think is crazy. And then similarly with have you experienced any online abuse or any abuse at a football ground? Both of them are in the 60% of women saying yes, which I thought I'd just throw that in there whilst we're talking about this.
Yeah, it's pretty damning evidence. It wouldn't require the sharpest jury in the world to see where we're going here. How much support I mean, I'm sure nothing yet, but how much support do you expect to get from the platforms in question?
So like Twitter and,
for example?
I signed a petition a while back, which was to make identification necessary for social media. And I know that the government discussed it because I got the email through which told me it. And they basically said that doing so takes away freedom of speech, which for me is just the fact that we're literally like ruining people on social media. Like, it's not a joke. People are killing themselves because of social media. Like, it's such a deep problem, and their argument is it takes away freedom of speech. To me, just feels so wrong. And the one thing that they did say is that because it has to be, we have to be able to protect people who are vulnerable, from, you know, it said something, it mentioned women who have been domestically abused, men who have been domestically abused. We have to keep them safe and allow them a voice under a name that isn't their own and things like that. So I understand there's people that we must protect, but for me, if we had if you had to identify yourself, as in, you know, like you do on is it Tinder? I think you have to like show a driving license or prove that it's you who's signing up, like an identification process. I, like you said with the money thing, I think that would just wipe 90% of it out, because most of these accounts wouldn't want to have any of what they're saying be tracked back to them as people, because it would be too easy then to arrest people for racial abuse online. Like, it's, but you know, they are talking about it, but I also agree there's only so much we can do. We can campaign for it to be spoken about again, but I don't think the big companies like that are that bothered, personally.
If I'm okay to jump in, I think the main issue for me working, you know, kind of not alongside these huge companies, but obviously I have an idea of how they work and stuff with what I do. I think the main thing for me, which gets me so frustrated, is so many of these companies and organizations just love to be seen to be doing something. Like, we love to whack a hashtag on our armbands and, you know, put it on the front of a shirt and get it trending for a week. And it's like, well, what is that actually doing? Like, are you reviewing your recruitment processes to make sure that women and, you know, BAME people like are represented? And what are you actually doing? Do you know what I mean? I think that's the main issue for me that I get so frustrated about. All these campaigns and these slogans are fantastic, but what are we really doing to combat the problem? I think it's just words on a screen, really, initially.
I think what we want to do though with Her Game Too is that we want to, yes, like you said, create the awareness, but also try and make a change in as many aspects as we can. So that being like whether we work with schools and younger girls, whether we, you know, we're working on a website at the moment, and we're going to have a blog, basically a blog section where we've offered to like girls across the internet to offer them a voice, a platform for them to tell us about their experiences, tell us about, you know, who their top 10 players are, without men coming in and saying you're wrong. Like, we want to offer that platform, and that's the main aim, is to get as many of the clubs behind us as possible, whether that's representing us, whether it's like putting us into their strategy, business strategy, whatever that is. We want to sort of really get stuck in and see change happening right from the bottom, you know, grassroots football all the way up to the top leagues.
Well, there's no doubt that community building's very powerful, and the voices from communities such as yourselves, which is ever growing and will continue to grow, do get taken more seriously than anonymous petitions and things like that. So even though the government would have to debate something over X amount of signatures or whatever, larger companies, I think, will only pay credence to that when they're kind of directly affected by it. So whilst it's in the talking stage, it's not a big deal. Communities and the people that actually use their platform, making a difference, raising awareness is a slightly different thing, because then you're fucking with the advertising money. Because if the people leave the platform, the ads don't get bought, they're not worth as much, etc., etc. Hence why my charging £10 a month is a genius plan, because you cover all the money you would have lost anyway.
Yeah.
It's not that genius. It's like fucking anyone could think of it.
But I think that's the frustrating thing, though. Like, I so many people say, why don't we just get an identification process? Why don't we charge? You know, there's so many ideas floating around. And when I get asked, what do you think should be done? I don't have all the answers. But the fact that sat here, you know, we can come up with a list of, you know, things that even slightly minimize the solution. It's like, why do these people with, you know, the government or Twitter, like a platform as big as Twitter and as, you know, wealthy as Twitter, and the government and the money that they absolutely, you know, plow into certain things, is just like I said, we've come up with a few things just now on the spot over a Zoom call, and it's like,
it'll
what
be
are you
someone's
like,
job.
where are you?
It'll be someone's job to be sorting
Yeah.
this out. You think, come on, step up.
Exactly.
But we've seen with Black Lives Matter and other things in the last year that, as I said, not just community, but mass movement of thought does change the dial slowly, maybe not brilliantly, but it starts. If you have a website and a blog that's publishing regularly and a growing community, not only will you get noticed, you'll be heard. And that's the big difference, is that you can notice a lot of things, but being heard is the key, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I compare it to the Super League. You know, how many people thought, well, you can't go against these big owners and these chairmen, these multi-billionaires, and, you know, the working class fans, they all stepped out and they made a change, and no one's voice is too small to make a change. If you group together and you have a good enough idea, which is what, you know, the 12 of us did effectively. We made a group chat over social media, and, you know, we made a wave across the nation. I think it just proves that, you know, there are things that can be done.
So do you think, you know, one of your, I don't know, again, there's 12 of you with lots of different ideas, but do you think one of your end goals then is for a systemic change in how social platforms operate? Because of course you can't punish a misogynistic male for having a bad opinion and an outdated opinion. Abuse is one thing, being a prick is another. And it's not, you know, the Twitter, for example, can't be judge and jury on a bunch of characters typed from a phone or a keyboard unless it's genuinely abusive or a word that shouldn't be written, etc., etc. The education piece, I think, is really interesting, especially at the school level, because there's a basic human decency thing that I find that we've missed. And I don't know if it's a generational thing or whatever. I just can't imagine in the 60s and 70s, obviously I wasn't alive, but I can't imagine that people were so wantonly abusive to each other. No matter, they obviously didn't have a platform for it, but it just doesn't fit right with the generation. When you listen to your parents and your grandparents talk, like, you wouldn't just pile into someone because they have a different opinion to you or come from a different background. So how much are you guys going to focus on the platforms and compared to just the sort of awareness piece? And if you're going to do that, how do you think you can get heard from a, you know, from an executive level at companies like Twitter and Facebook?
I think the first,
my
brain's just condensing all the
I don't think it's a question that's answered like we're going to do X, Y, Z. It's more like, if you look at Black Lives Matter, they have to go to the degree that the world has to unite here on this. And because it's very visible, you know, big leagues and organizations all got together because they're organized, they've got big comms teams, and they've got big budgets to get together and do stuff like this. It's a lot harder when there's, you know, 12 guys who come up with an idea. But, you know, clearly, well, from my point of view, I've seen it all over the web for the last week, so it's working, especially if people like me see it. So it's just a question of like how, maybe it's, let's rephrase it, like, you're obviously driven to turn this into a big online community with specific aims in mind. Let's change the thing. What's the first thing you really want to achieve in the coming months? Now you've kind of got the thing rolling, you've got your ideas. What's the first thing you'd like to see happen, or what benefit would you like to see come from the recent publicity you've had?
I think coming off the back of what you just said and mentioning Black Lives Matter, for me, if we just remove like Twitter and the FA and Facebook and everyone, for me, like with the Black Lives Matter movement, it enabled me to as a very privileged white female living in the UK, it enabled me to see other people's experiences and try and think about other people a little bit more. And personally, I now, because of what's happened over the last year with that movement, would feel way more confident in standing up for something if I heard it and it was wrong. And I wonder whether that sort of mentality is something we can look to find for, you know, if a man overhears another man kind of calling a woman out for being sexist, whether it's online or in person, maybe that man would feel a little bit more informed and a little bit more confident to be able to say, shut up, you know? And I wonder whether that's the sort of like thing we need to look at as more of like the human community aspect rather than the big dogs up the top. Because that's what the Black Lives Matter movement did for me. It made me feel more confident in being able to say no, or calling people out when they've been racist, you know. So hopefully we can do a similar sort of thing.
I completely agree. I think one of the key words is education, and if it's not being done in schools, etc., I feel like some of us do have a duty to speak up and use our platforms, which luckily enough now, us 12 girls, we do have a growing platform, a rapidly growing platform, to be able to, you know, hopefully offer that education. I think obviously we received so many unbelievably nice comments. It was hard to sift through them all. But I think personally, some of the best ones for me was seeing men say, oh, I used to say that when I was younger, or, you know, the videos made me aware of, you know, some things I'd say in the office that are so casually sexist. And now I'll think twice when I'm saying, oh, which one do you fancy the most then out of the starting 11 kind of thing. That was the thing for me that I was like, yes,
change.
We're making you think. Yeah, we're making you think. And and credit to those people as well who did, you know, who admitted that, because I think a lot of people don't want to come out and, you know, go against. It's kind of, that's another generational thing. I feel like we're so headstrong, and we don't like being told no, or we don't like switching our opinions. So seeing that, I think for me, felt like the most you know, rewarding comments that we received.
We also got some from men who go to the football with their daughters and or wives, and said because of this, they haven't experienced this doesn't happen. And like what you said about the Black Lives Matter, Amy, like some people are in this little bubble and don't realise that it is going on. And it's okay to step back and say, I didn't know, but it clearly is, and what can I do to help? And you worry for the dad going with his daughter saying, no, it's not, because that's not the support that you need. Like, she needs to know that it isn't acceptable. And I think if you've got that attitude, then the young girls that are going are going to think that they don't belong, and then it's just going to get into this horrible cycle where it takes someone who can go against the grain to go to the pub or to the game, and you really shouldn't. Like, that's so dated now. So yeah, being able to admit that maybe everything isn't as happy as you think. Just because you're doing it right doesn't mean that everyone else is doing it right.
Yeah, I think that you know, I followed some of the threads, both on the video and then other comments, and you know, it was obviously quite absurd to see, you know, people even making slightly annoying comments on the video thread itself. But I think there's an element of to be expected that, you know, will only change over a period of time, right? You know, it's not going to happen instantly. People aren't going to suddenly have an epiphany and be like, my goodness, you know, that it will happen. And I think what you're doing is really great. I don't want to keep you too much longer because you've probably got interesting things to do. But one thing I do want to talk about, just briefly maybe, is where do you see, or what currency do you put on the involvement of people who have big social reaches to help you get to your goal? I mean, we saw Laura Woods, you know, thanking you and that sort of thing. You know, how important is it? And this is where obviously Black Lives Matter went stratospheric, because you've got you know, people with powerful reaches saying, how important is it that you get the support from sort of important, doesn't necessarily have to be female, but figures in the sports industry and obviously football in the main, to help kind of take you to the next level again?
Go on, Babs. Go, Eve.
Oh yes, so it's so incredibly important, because every single time we get support from someone who is looked up to, who has a big following, who people respect anything that comes out their mouth, all the people that have tried to shoot us down, say it's embarrassing. There have been a few people that have said, oh, like, oh, I can't believe they've done this, like they're so embarrassed, and we're not at all, because every single time we get a retweet by a notable person, and just knowing that we're getting that support, like I hope that the people who have come for the video might just reflect and think, okay, maybe it's not cool to shoot it down, and this is actually really needed. But in this day and age, like influencers, they hold like so much importance on the platform, whether that's good or not I don't know, but and people look up to them, and by having someone just retweeting a little comment, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, it's important for our campaign.
It definitely adds credibility as well, you know, because we are, I don't want to say just 12 girls, like, because we're, you know, we've obviously managed to create something pretty good just being 12 girls, but it does offer some credibility and validity to the campaign when people, you know, like Laura Woods kind of shares it. And, you know, there's definitely people we have in mind who we'd love to see it and support. You know, I think about someone like Rio Ferdinand, like he's so influential in the football industry, like particularly on Twitter with fans and everything. You think, imagine if he were to support that. You know, there's definitely people who we look at and think be so great for them to kind of get on board with us, because it is important. It's a shame we live in a world where we rely on that, but I think we'd still, without, if you take those people out, I'd still think we'd have a pretty valid and strong cause, but it does help definitely getting the message across.
Just to chip in quickly, I think as well, for so many of these big people on Twitter, it's so easy to not say anything. So the fact that they're willing to back us and support us, and, you know, go against the grain, I suppose, and retweet something that's seen as controversial, which again seems absolutely insane, is fantastic. And for women like Laura Woods, it's not just about the, you know, the stereotypically misogynistic footballing environment. It's about the girls that are, you know, they're the only girl on the schoolyard playing with a group of boys. And even, I mean, my experience in school, I was always that girl that was kicking a ball around with the boys. But yeah, but it was from other groups of girls as well, being like, she's doing it for boys' attention. So it goes, it's not just the, like I said, the stereotypically misogynistic men. It is groups of girls in school. You know, it's groups of girls who play, you know, Sunday league, and it's all, and then it's women on Twitter, it's women at football games. There's so many just branches that you can cover, and yeah, I think we would love to be able to cover all of them, you know, community, social media, you know, actual footballing games, grassroots football, school
education
football.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I think that would be absolutely key, and by the influence of these bigger people in these platforms, I think we can do a pretty good job.
Well, it's interesting. I've got plenty of ideas on how we can support you both as a sporting blog and as Racing League as well. Racing does lead the way in what you would call mainstream sports with this stuff. Our audience profile is 60-40 in terms of men and women. Almost 5 million people a year go racing, and that split remains. And I think there's something we can do to help you out here too, because there's still issues. No matter how well we're doing, there's still stuff we can do, and I think that we can transcend sport and do something a bit bigger to help. So look, guys, I'm going to let you get on. It's been really good to talk. I think we could probably talk about this all day, because as Caitlin refers, there's so many branches to this, and from, you know, the behavior of platforms to the behavior of humans, and to the behaviour of generations. This is the one thing that really sticks with me is what generational difference can you make? What example can you set your son or daughter? Because, you know, there's a pretty influential learning that happens at home. And for me, if people are thinking that this is a normal way to behave, or this is what we did, or he's just having a laugh, boys, or we boys, that's where I think you can cut a lot of this stuff off at the roots. But again, probably for another day. I'd love to catch up again in a couple of months, maybe see how progress has been, especially after the Euros and a big summer of football. And Amy's got a reasonably important game coming up at the weekend, which
I know. So does Caitlin.
Yeah,
yes,
mine's
that's right,
Monday.
of course.
We both do.
Yeah.
Even I will just sit here with kind of nothing to.
You just enjoy it.
Nothing
Yeah,
to be
just
happy
enjoy
about.
it.
Must be nice to just sit and
Yeah.
enjoy, eh?
Okay, guys. I will say to the listeners, I'll put all of the girls' social handles in the show notes, links to various websites and publicity that Her Game 2 has had so far. I imagine feel free to reach out if you'd like more information, and of course comment or give me a shout if there's anything I can do to help. Thanks, guys. I will try and get
Amazing.
this published very soon. It's been a
Thank
pleasure to talk to you, and really well done on what you're doing, and I look forward to following your progress and helping where I can.
Thanks so much.
Ollie.
Thanks for all the support as well.
You're welcome anytime.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.